How's it going, American history students? This is Mr. Bell, and welcome to your very first video lesson of American History 2. Now, this is going to be a short unit, especially compared to some of the longer ones like Unit 2. However, you notice this is starting at 1.3 instead of 1.1, 1.2. Those first two sections of the first unit of American 2 overlap with American 1. So rather than retread that material, I'm starting with pure American 2 stuff. So anything you're going to be held accountable for is starting from here on out. With that being said, if you have any questions about the style of the course or just for me in general, email me at bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. I'm glad to have you in the class. I hope these video lessons help. I realize it's not going to be as good as actually being here, but it's better than getting no instruction from the teacher. And if you have any questions, always feel free to email me. So let's get into it. This section covers the rise of populism. And I rock when I do these videos on this, so I hope that doesn't bother anybody or make anybody nauseous, but it just helps me get into the lesson. I'm just sitting here in my room, so you'll get used to this. I know a lot of you have had me last semester, so you are. So, populism is a political movement that makes all the politicians' policies driven toward the people. Hence, populism comes from the word population, which is the count of the people in a given area. So, you may think, wait, isn't that a politician's job to serve the people, be about the people? Of course it is. However, I know that politicians often care way more about themselves than they do their constituents, the people they represent, and they care way more about themselves sometimes than they do the country or the party, let's just be honest. So prior to this, like the 1890s, you had politicians who were more about their party platform or more about establishing America's role in the world. Whereas populism is, hey, how can I, as somebody running for office, make your life better on a day-to-day basis? And people want to hear, who are voting, how you're going to make their lives better. So this resonated with a lot of people. So following the rise of populism, what you see is it trickle in to every major political party since. Now, in different time periods, you get more populism than others. Some candidates are more populist than others. Trump was very populist. Bernie Sanders was very populist. Hillary Clinton, not as much. Joe Biden, not necessarily as much. So it's there in our modern politics. The rise of populism started with originally its own party, the Populist Party. And what was the platform of the party? So a platform of a party, if you don't know from civics, is the party's belief system. What do they stand for? What do they want to do if they are elected into government? So let's look at some of these things. Now, they have 4 what are called planks. These are individual beliefs. You put the planks together to make the party's platform. Platform, something you stand on. The Omaha platform, which is named after William Jennings Bryan. He's the creator of the Populist Party. He's from Omaha, Nebraska, which is why they call it that. The platform is what the party stands for. So, free coinage of silver. This will make more sense as we get into this lesson. But they wanted the silver, which was not as a rare of a metal as gold, to back up the dollar. They wanted to be able to convert the substance, the material of silver, into paper money. They wanted the government to regulate the railroad so that it was fair to individuals using it, just as fair to individuals as it was to big businesses. They wanted a graduated income tax, sometimes called a progressive tax. The more you make, the more the government takes. So somebody like a doctor or a lawyer would pay more in taxes than someone who runs a small farm or runs a small shop in town. Limits on alien land and ownership. They weren't necessarily anti-immigrants, but they weren't pro either, and they didn't like the idea of immigrants who were not yet officially citizens of the U.S. owning land. So William Jennings Bryan creates the Populist Party. He builds a big following of people out west. You had people such as the farmers. You had people such as the teetotalers, so this means they were teetotally against alcohol. They supported prohibition, which is the 18th Amendment to ban alcohol. Now, William Jennings Bryan is one of the most important politicians to have never been president. He ran for president twice, once after creating the Populist Party as a populist, and once as a Democrat, infusing that party with the populism message. Lost both times. So why are we studying him? Why is he so consequential if he never became president? Because he injected populism into the mainstream of American political parties and is still impacting us, as I mentioned earlier, to this day. His biggest moment comes at the Democratic National Convention the second time he is running for president. He goes on stage, he accepts his party's nomination, he delivers a speech called The Cross of Gold. And the message of this speech, through the metaphor of America crucifying itself on a cross of gold, which you get the religious parallel, so it catches a lot of people's attention, is that if America continues to be a place that focuses only on the wealthy and big businesses and the elite, then America as we know it will cease to exist. And this is a message that a lot of populists have today. Mary Elizabeth Lease is the second face, I would say, of the populist movement. In fact, when Bryan becomes a Democrat, she does become the face of the populist movement. Now, if this were today, she probably would have been the one running for president, but this is in the late 1800s, so we're not at the time period where women were going to be running for that high of office yet. Mary Elizabeth Lease, why brilliant, why a great speaker. She's from Kansas. Her nickname's the Kansas Cyclone. She would go into an area, rile people up, get people very inspired. She was a great speaker. Obviously, women's rights groups supported her. Temperance movement supported her. People wanting to ban alcohol. But sometimes she can come across as too abrasive, not personable. And this kept her, I think, from becoming bigger than she ultimately could have been. Now, that being said, if she were running today, I think she would have had a much more realistic shot of becoming a big power player in one of the two major political parties. So, I'm going to make this as simple as I can. Silver is more common than gold. Still expensive, still rare, but not as rare as gold. There is an abundance of silver in the middle part of America. You probably learned about the Nevada silver rush, known as the Comstock Lode, that took place in southern Nevada in American History 1. So what these farmers in the West wanted to do was to be able to take that silver and, just like you could for gold, exchange that for paper money. Now, you can't spend a bar of silver, you can't spend a bar of gold, it's valuable, but you have to somehow translate that into something you can use to buy things. So they pushed for a silver standard to go along with the gold standard. The problem that a lot of people feared is that if you allowed silver to back up the dollar as well as gold, more money would need to be printed in a very short period of time. This would lead to what we call inflation, which is prices going up. Anytime you print more money, inflation occurs. There's natural inflation over time. So, for example, a gallon of milk costs a lot more today than it did in 1955. But you don't want superinflation, which is when prices go up really high, really fast. If you were printing this much money, that's probably what you would have. And it would be bad for the economy, which is the people who were against the silver standard was their argument. We talked about this earlier. It talks about the Populist Party platform. You can look at this in the notes. This is a review slide, the Omaha platform. Farmers were a big part of the Populist Party support group, part of the base of the Populist Party. Let's see why. You have at this time the first, what will come to be known as unions. This is when workers within a given field would come together, they would unite, and they would push for better benefits, better working conditions. One of the first we have in America is called the Grange, and they become a core part of the populist movement. Now, you have the Grange. You have the Farmers Alliance. It's a failure because while being inclusive and progressive for the time, having black and white members, this caused a lot of infighting, so the Farmers Alliance fell. Then you had the Colored Farmers Alliance, which is an African-American farmers union founded in Texas. It thrived. So you had the white members from the Farmers Alliance go to the Grange. You had the black members from the Farmers Alliance create the Colored Farmers Alliance. So you have these two big farming unions that are a huge, huge part of this base of the Populist Party. Big supporters of the Kansas Cyclone, Mary Elizabeth Lease, and big supporters of William Jennings Bryan. We'll talk about why here in a minute. So the big problem is once the Transcontinental Railroad is built and you have smaller railroads built, you have big businesses using the railroad at a cheaper rate than smaller farmers. The way the railroad figured is, hey, a big corporation is going to use the railroad a lot more over time throughout the course of a year. Let's give them a cheaper rate. We'll end up getting more money out of them because they'll be using it more. Farmers didn't like this. They're like, how could you give a discount to these big corporations and not do the same for smaller farmers? So they had their voice, they had their concerns voiced. The Populist Party raised a big uprising about it. So then the railroad decided to do something about it. They did this in the form of rebates. So it was almost a loophole. So they said, okay, we'll raise the price on big business, but we're going to keep the price for farmers using the railroad, Transcontinental and other wise, the same. Now here's how a rebate worked. You would say you're a big business, and they say, hey, we're going to charge you $1,000 to ship something out. And then they tell a farmer, we're going to charge you $500. Well, at first glance, $1,000, a lot more than $500. But what they told to these bigger businesses is, hey, you'll pay $1,000, but we're going to give you an $800 rebate at the end of the month or the end of the year, depending on how they wanted to do it. So think about this. If I pay $1,000 to ship something at the beginning of January, and then at the end of January, I get $800 of that back, did I pay $1,000? No, I paid $200. You don't have to be a mathematician to figure that one out. Whereas you had the smaller businesses and the farmers, small farmers trying to ship their crops, still being charged $500. So from the outside, it looked like, hey, one's paying $1,000, one's paying $500, big business $1,000, small farmer $500. But they didn't realize that you had these kickbacks, these rebates that were being given to big business. This is where you get laws via the Supreme Court. We used to call them common laws when we talked about it in civics and American One, that try to make things better for the consumer. So let's look at a couple of these. You have Munn versus Illinois, and both of these are versus Illinois. This allowed states to regulate economic activity within a state. So if you're shipping something from Raleigh to Charlotte, North Carolina would regulate it, not the U.S. government. Almost kind of reaffirms previous assumptions, but does it legally through the Supreme Court. Then you have bosch versus Illinois. It reaffirms Gibbons versus Ogden, which is a case you learned in American One. I know you maybe forgot it. And it said that when you ship goods from one state to another, interstate commerce, sell goods from one state to another, the federal government would regulate it. Well, what makes that different from Gibbons versus Ogden? They had been saying this since the early part of America. Here's what makes it different. This time, it's going to create a commission to make sure the rules are being followed. Because before they were saying, hey, to a business, if you ship something from one state to another, here are the rules. There was nobody enforcing them. So this is where you get the big impact of this case. And bosch is definitely a lot more important than Munn. And bosch versus Illinois creates the Interstate Commerce Act. This isn't which creates the Interstate Commerce Agency, which is an agency, a regulatory agency that makes sure that the laws, when you sell goods from one state to another, are being followed. If they're not, there can be fines and eventually legal action that could result in jail time. Greenbacks, that is the name that Populists gave paper money. Bimetallism, or people, is the belief, and bimetallists are the people that say both gold and silver should back up the dollar. Silver never becomes a standard of the dollar. In other words, silver, despite the populists causing an uproar for a brief moment in American history, is never used to back up the dollar. So let's look at the last section here, and that'll do it for Unit 1 of American History 2. This talks about technological advancements of the West and farming. Barbed wire, something that you and I see every day if you ride through the country of Cleveland County. Invented by Joseph Glidden, it ends the open range. So it does two things. It keeps livestock in, but it keeps predators such as coyotes out. Creates large-scale ranching. The windmill. Wind power is used to irrigate the dry plains, to water the dry plains. Now, it's an affordable way to provide power. It's an affordable way to provide irrigation. However, it is reliant on the wind conditions. The steel plow you talked about in American 1 is an innovation of the iron plow that Jethro Wood invented. John Deere perfects it with the steel version. Today we call these a tiller in the South, but this breaks up the land and makes it easier to plant a garden or a farm. The changes of the farming business. Farmer co-ops. So when individual farmers were being ripped off by the railroad rates, they decide, hey, we need to find a way to save money. Well, you may know when you buy things in bulk, you save money. So a lot of people think of places like Sam's Club or Costco. You go and you get a big 50 pack of M&Ms from Sam's Club. It's going to be a lot cheaper than if you buy 50 individual packs of M&Ms from the gas station or from Walmart. So what you have a lot of times is people who are selling concessions at like our football games, or they're operating a business, as they go to places like Sam's Club, buy in bulk so they can make a profit selling those M&M packets individually. The more you buy, the bigger discount you get. Well, smaller farmers didn't need a lot of this equipment that the bigger farmers did, but they all needed some of the same basic stuff. So farmer co-ops were born. This is where farms would come together, pool their resources, their money together, buy things in bulk so they could get a discounted rate on things they would use at their farm. A big game changer was the refrigerator car. This allows them to transport perishable items across the transcontinental and other railroads. In other words, things that can expire. Makes it easier to they don't have to transport live cattle now. Okay, butchers can do what they need to do and transport it in a refrigerated car. Of course, that will be miniaturized to create the freezer and the refrigerator for home appliances in the future. Okay, that's it for Unit 1 of American History 2. Shortest unit you'll have all year, because I essentially cut it in half, but I think you got what you needed to out of it. Of course, you got the PowerPoints and stuff you can look back on in this module. If you have any questions, please email me at bsbell@clevelandcountyschools.org. Thank you so much. Stay safe. Peace out.